My son brought his fiancée home. She cornered me in the kitchen, shoving me against the counter. You'll regret this, I calmly said, not as much as you'll regret faking that pregnancy. Her face turned sheet white as the test results dropped onto the counter. I always imagined the day my son, Jacob, would bring home the woman he wanted to marry. I thought it would be one of those warm, picture-perfect moments. He'd introduce her, I'd see the love in his eyes, and I'd know in my heart she was right for him. What I didn't imagine was being cornered in my own kitchen, my back pressed against the counter, staring into the furious eyes of a woman who had just THR-18'd me. You'll regret this, she hissed, her fingers tightening around my wrist. I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. Instead, I calmly placed the envelope on the countertop between us, my voice steady as I spoke. Not as much as you'll regret faking that pregnancy. The color drained from her face so fast I thought she might faint. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. Her whole body stiffened as her gaze darted between me and the envelope. The weight of her secret, the lie she had built everything on, was crashing down around her. And she knew it. A few months earlier, Jacob had called me from Atlanta, sounding happier than I'd heard him in years. Mom, I met someone, he said, and I could hear the excitement in his voice. She's amazing. Her name is Elise. That's wonderful, I said, genuinely pleased for him. He told me how they met at some networking event for young professionals. She worked in marketing. She was sharp, confident, and beautiful. The total package, he called her. And then he hesitated. She's pregnant, he admitted after a long pause. I leaned forward in my chair, my fingers gripping the phone a little tighter. Oh, it wasn't planned, he said quickly. But I love her, Mom. We're engaged. I let his words sink in, swallowing my surprise. I could hear the nerves in his voice. He wanted my approval, my blessing. And honestly, if he was happy, I was happy. But something about the way he said it, we're engaged, felt off. Forced. Like he was convincing himself more than he was convincing me. Are you sure about this, sweetheart? I asked gently. Yes. Too fast. And that was my first little warning bell. The first crack in the perfect story he was telling me. When Jacob and Elise arrived that weekend, I was ready to keep an open mind. I met them at the front door, smiling as my son stepped forward to hug me. It's so good to see you, Mom. You too, honey. I pulled back, my eyes shifting to the woman at his side. Elise was stunning. Tall, slim, long dark hair that fell in soft waves, and sharp cheekbones that gave her an almost regal look. Her eyes were bright, but there was something else beneath them, something guarded. Diana, she said warmly, stepping forward to hug me. I've been so excited to meet you. Likewise, I said. Her grip was tight, a little too firm. I invited them in, and as they set their bags down, I stole a glance at Jacob. He looked different, not unhappy, but tense. He kept glancing at Elise, as if he was making sure she approved of everything. That was my second little warning bell. Dinner was pleasant enough. Elise was polite, engaging, and laughed at the right moments. She talked about work, about her childhood in North Carolina, about how she and Jacob just clicked from the moment they met. But something felt rehearsed. More than that, something felt off about the pregnancy. She never touched her stomach, never mentioned morning sickness or cravings or anything. I waited for some small, natural moment where she'd rest a hand on her belly, expecting mothers do that without thinking. But she never did. Jacob, on the other hand, did. When the topic came up, he was the one who placed a hand on her stomach, smiling with this wide-eyed, hopeful look. And Elise? She barely reacted. That was my third warning bell. After dinner, as I cleared the dishes, I casually asked, So, Elise, how far along are you now? Just over 2 months, she said easily. And have you had your first ultrasound yet? She hesitated. It was a tiny pause, maybe half a second, but I caught it. Not yet, she said smoothly. I've been meaning to schedule it, but things have been so hectic with the engagement. Another warning bell. She was 2 months pregnant and hadn't scheduled a doctor's appointment? That didn't sit right with me. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The next morning, when Jacob left to pick up coffee, I decided to do a little snooping. I wasn't proud of it, but I trusted my gut, and my gut was screaming at me that something wasn't right. In the bathroom, I checked the trash. Nothing. No used pregnancy tests. No prenatal vitamin bottles. I spotted her purse sitting on the counter, slightly open. I hesitated for a moment before glancing inside. Birth control pills. My blood ran cold. My mind raced through possibilities. Maybe she had them left over from before she got pregnant. Maybe she hadn't thrown them out yet. But something told me, no. I needed proof. That's when I made a call to an old friend, a nurse at a clinic in Atlanta. I asked if she could check for me. A few hours later, I got a text back. No medical records of pregnancy under Elise's name. I felt sick. Now I had no doubt. Elise was lying. But why? Was she after Jacob's money? Did she want to trap him in a marriage? Whatever it was, I knew one thing. I needed to get her out of his life. That evening, I set a trap. I left an envelope on the kitchen counter labeled paternity test results. Completely fake. I wanted to see her reaction. I made sure she saw me place it there. And just as I expected, minutes later, she stormed into the kitchen, her face twisted in fury. That's when she shoved me against the counter. "You'll regret this," she spat, her eyes wild. I didn't waver. I simply slid the envelope closer to her and said, "Not as much as you'll regret faking that pregnancy." She went pale, frozen, and that's when Jacob walked in. "What's going on?" His voice was sharp, confused. I turned to him and said calmly, "Jacob, Elise has something to tell you." He looked at her, waiting. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Then, she did the only thing she could. She ran. Jacob stood frozen in place as Elise stormed out of the kitchen, her heels clicking furiously against the hardwood floor. The air in the room felt thick, heavy with the weight of what had just happened. My heart pounded, but I kept my face neutral, waiting for Jacob to process it. He turned to me slowly, his brows furrowed, his jaw tight. "Mom, what the hell just happened?" I exhaled, picking up the fake test results and holding them up. I was hoping Elise would explain, but since she ran, I guess that's my job. He blinked, his lips pressing together in a thin line. "Explain what?" I softened my voice. "She's not pregnant, Jacob." His entire body stiffened. "What?" I placed the envelope down in front of him and gestured to it. "It's fake, just a bluff. But the truth is, I already know the answer." I checked Jacob. There are no medical records of Elise being pregnant. Not a single appointment, no ultrasounds, nothing. His face was unreadable, but I saw the way his Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. He shook his head slightly, as if trying to push the thought away. "No, that doesn't make sense." I could see the wheels turning in his mind, his logical side fighting against the reality in front of him. He wanted to believe in Elise. He wanted to believe that the woman he loved wouldn't lie to him like this. "I found birth control pills in her bag," I added gently. His breath hitched. He stared at me, his lips parting like he wanted to argue, to deny it, but then his shoulders slumped. "No," he muttered under his breath, rubbing a hand over his face. "No, no, no." I reached for his arm, my touch light. "Jacob." He stepped back, shaking his head more forcefully this time. "You don't understand, Mom. We talked about the baby. She told me how excited she was. She let me put my hand on her stomach." His voice broke slightly. "Why would she do that if she was lying?" I sighed. "Because she wanted you to believe it. Because she wanted something from you, Jacob." He dragged a hand through his hair, his chest rising and falling faster. He was spiraling, and I could see it. His whole world had just cracked in half. Then, his head snapped up, his face suddenly dark with realization. "Where is she?" I glanced toward the front of the house. I think before I could finish, he was already moving. He stormed through the hallway, yanking the front door open and stepping outside. I followed, my heart pounding. Elise was in her car, her hands shaking as she fumbled with the keys. "Elise!" Jacob's voice was sharp, cutting through the night air. She flinched, but didn't turn around. Her hand was shaking too much to unlock the car door. Jacob reached her in seconds, grabbing her wrist. Not hard, just enough to stop her. "Tell me the truth." She finally looked up at him, her face pale, eyes wide with panic. "Jacob, are you pregnant or not?" She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her throat worked like she was trying to force the lie out, trying to think of some way to wriggle out of it. "Elise," he repeated, his voice quieter this time. "Please." Tears welled in her eyes, and, for a split second, I thought she might actually feel remorse. That maybe, just maybe, she'd tell him the truth. Instead, she yanked her wrist free, her voice shaking as she snapped, "I can't believe you're listening to her over me." Jacob took a step back, his face unreadable. "That's not an answer." She swallowed hard, then suddenly straightened her spine, her expression hardening. "Fine," she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "You want the truth?" Jacob didn't move. She let out a humorless laugh, crossing her arms. "No, I'm not pregnant." The words seemed to hit Jacob like a physical blow. His entire body sagged, and for a second I thought he might collapse. He blinked rapidly, like he couldn't quite process what she had just admitted. "But I did it for us," Elise continued, her voice turning desperate now. "Jacob, I love you. I knew if I didn't do something, you'd never commit. You're always so careful, always so logical about everything. I just needed to give you a push." Jacob stared at her like he didn't even recognize the person in front of him. I took a cautious step closer. "A push," I repeated, my voice quiet but firm. "You tried to trap him, Elise. You manipulated him." She whirled on me. "You were never going to accept me. You were waiting for me to fail from the second I walked into that house." I tilted my head. "And yet, here we are. You did that all on your own." Jacob let out a shaky breath and took a step back. This is insane." He looked at Elise like she was a stranger, like the woman he had loved had been replaced by someone he didn't even know. "I told you I loved you. I asked you to marry me. You didn't need to do this." Tears streamed down her face. "But you were never going to choose me over your mother." I sucked in a breath, stunned by the accusation. Jacob's expression turned ice cold. That's what this was really about, wasn't it? His voice was eerily calm. It was never about the baby. It was about control. You wanted to make sure I had no way out. She opened her mouth to argue, but nothing came out. Jacob exhaled sharply, then reached into his pocket and pulled out the engagement ring, the one he had been so excited to give her. For a long moment, he just stared at it, his thumb rubbing over the band. Then he took her hand, turned it palm up, and placed the ring there. Elise gasped, shaking her head. Jacob, no, we're done, he said, his voice devoid of emotion. She stood there frozen, staring at him, waiting for him to take it back. But he didn't. Instead, he turned and walked away. I stayed for a moment, watching Elise as she trembled, the weight of what she had just lost settling over her. Then, without another word, I followed my son inside. Jacob sat on the couch, his elbows resting on his knees, his hands clasped together as he stared at the floor. I sat beside him, placing a hand on his back. He didn't speak right away. Then, after a long silence, he whispered, "I almost married her." I gave his back a slow, soothing rub. "I know, sweetheart. I really thought she was the one." I squeezed his shoulder gently. "You loved who you thought she was. That's not your fault." He let out a shaky breath and finally looked up at me. His eyes were red, but behind them I saw something else. Clarity, acceptance, and just a flicker of relief. We sat there in silence for a long time. I knew my son would be okay. He was hurt, yes, but one day he would heal. And Elise? Something told me this was only the beginning of her regrets. The house was quiet except for the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. Jacob sat there, his shoulders hunched forward, his fingers tangled in his hair as he let out slow, uneven breaths. I didn't say anything. I knew my son well enough to understand he needed time to process what had just happened. Elise was gone. Her keys had rattled. Her tires had screeched against the pavement as she sped off into the night. But her presence still lingered, like a shadow stretching across the room, refusing to fade. Jacob let out a humorless chuckle, shaking his head. I was such an idiot. I reached over, squeezing his knee gently. "You weren't an idiot, sweetheart. You were in love." His jaw tightened. "Love," he scoffed. "Love shouldn't feel like this." He sat back against the couch, staring up at the ceiling, blinking rapidly. "I was going to marry her. I was ready to be a father." His voice cracked slightly at the last word, and my heart ached for him. "You were willing to step up," I said softly. "That says a lot about who you are, Jacob. It's a good thing." He let out a bitter laugh. "Yeah? Well, it was all for nothing." I hesitated before saying, "You tell me. Was it really for nothing?" His brows furrowed. "You learned something tonight. You saw her for who she really is." He rubbed his temples. "Yeah, a liar. A manipulator." And his lips parted slightly, but he didn't seem to know what to say. I sighed. "Jacob, you would have married her. You would have spent the rest of your life trying to make something work that was built on a lie. She would have controlled you, drained you. Maybe this hurts now, but believe me, it would have hurt a hell of a lot more years down the line." He swallowed hard as Adam's apple bobbing. "I thought she was my future." I gave his hand a squeeze. "She's your past now." Silence settled between us, heavy and full. Then, after a moment, Jacob's face twisted. His breathing hitched, and his fingers dug into his hair. "Oh my God," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "What?" He looked at me, his eyes dark with realization. "Mom, what if she never planned to fake a pregnancy, forever?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" His throat worked as he swallowed. "What if she planned to get pregnant for real?" A shiver ran down my spine. She knew I wanted to do the right thing. She knew I'd marry her if I thought she was carrying my child. Maybe she just needed to buy herself enough time to actually get pregnant. My stomach twisted. It made sense. Too much sense. Elise had been caught in her lie too early. But if she had managed to hold on for another month or two, she could have gotten pregnant for real, either through trickery or pure luck, and then there would have been no getting out of it. Jacob would have married her. He would have been legally tied to her for the rest of his life. I exhaled slowly. "I think you might be right." His face crumpled. "Jesus Christ." He pressed his palms against his eyes, breathing heavily. I dodged a freaking bullet. I wanted to tell him that everything would be okay, that he would move on from this. But I also knew this kind of betrayal didn't just disappear overnight. After a long silence, he let out a shaky breath. "I need a drink." I hesitated before nodding. "I think I do too." Jacob let out a short, humorless chuckle and pushed himself off the couch. I followed him into the kitchen, where he grabbed a bottle of whiskey from the cabinet and poured 2 glasses. "To dodging bullets," he muttered, clinking his glass against mine before downing half of it in one go. I sipped mine, watching him carefully. He looked exhausted, like the weight of the entire evening was finally settling on him. "Does it get easier?" he asked suddenly, setting his glass down. "What?" "Being betrayed by someone you love." I sighed, setting my own glass down. "It depends." "On what?" I studied with my son for a moment. He looked raw wounded, like he had been cracked open and hadn't quite figured out how to put himself back together. It depends on whether or not you let it define you. His brows knitted together. If you let this turn you bitter, if you let this make you afraid to trust again, then no, it doesn't get easier. It just festers. I took a deep breath. But if you learn from it, if you use this as a reminder to trust your gut, to pay attention to red flags, to demand more from the people in your life, then yeah, it gets easier. Jacob ran a hand down his face. I ignored a lot of red flags, didn't I? I hesitated before nodding. Yeah, you did. He let out a slow exhale, nodding to himself. Never again. I reached over, brushing my hand over his. One day, you're going to meet someone who's nothing like Elise. Someone who doesn't need to manipulate you to keep you. Jacob gave me a tired smile. I hope you're right. I squeezed his hand. I am. We sat in silence for a while, sipping our drinks, letting the weight of the evening settle. The house still felt thick with the remnants of Elise's presence, but little by little, it felt like she was fading. And I knew that soon, so would the pain. Jacob stayed up late that night. I knew he wouldn't sleep. Not after everything that had just happened. He sat in the living room, swirling the last bit of whiskey in his glass, staring at nothing in particular. I stayed with him for a while, but eventually, I gave him space. Lying in bed, I thought about Elise. About the kind of woman who could do something like this. Did she ever really love him? Or was this all part of some calculated plan? Sleep didn't come easily, and when I finally drifted off, I dreamt of shadows in my house. Of Elise standing in the doorway, watching me with those sharp, unreadable eyes. I woke up in a cold sweat. The next morning, Jacob looked rough, his hair disheveled, dark circles under his eyes. But he was clear-headed and angry. I need to get my things from her place, he said over coffee. I nodded slowly. Do you want me to come with you? He hesitated, then shook his head. No, I have to do this myself. I didn't argue. I knew he needed this closure. By the time he left, I was restless. Something about all of this still wasn't sitting right with me. Elise had been exposed, humiliated, but she wasn't the type to give up so easily. I knew, deep in my gut, that she wasn't done yet. Hours passed. Jacob didn't text. I tried to distract myself, cleaning the kitchen, organizing the spice rack, folding laundry, but my mind kept circling back to him. To what else might I do? Finally, I grabbed my phone and called him. It rang, and rang, and rang. Then, voicemail. Something in my stomach twisted. I tried again. Nothing. I set my phone down, tapping my fingers anxiously against the counter. Maybe he was just busy. Maybe he was talking to Elise, packing up his things. Or maybe something was wrong. I didn't even hesitate. I grabbed my keys and headed out the door. Jacob's apartment was in Midtown Atlanta, about a 4-hour drive for Charleston. I spent the entire ride gripping the steering wheel, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. What if Elise was manipulating him again? What if she was trying to guilt him into staying? What if she knew? I forced myself to breathe. Jacob is smart. He wouldn't fall for it again. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. When I finally reached his place, his car was parked outside. That was a good sign. At least he was home. I knocked on the door. Waited. No answer. I knocked again, harder this time. Jacob. Still nothing. Panic crept up my spine. I reached for my phone, ready to call him again, when suddenly, the door creaked open. Jacob stood there, his expression unreadable. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes slightly bloodshot. He looked exhausted. Mom. His voice was hoarse. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Jesus, Jacob, I've been calling you. Are you okay? He blinked, then rubbed the back of his neck. Yeah, sorry. My phone died. I narrowed my eyes. Something fell off. Did you see Elise? He let out a dry chuckle, stepping aside to let me in. Oh yeah, I saw her. I stepped inside, my eyes scanning the room. His apartment was a mess. Half-packed bags, clothes thrown around, papers scattered across the coffee table. What happened? I asked cautiously. Jacob ran a hand through his hair. She lost it, Mom. Full meltdown. I crossed my arms. Define meltdown. He let out a slow breath. I went to get my stuff. Thought she wouldn't be home, but she was. He shook his head. She started crying, big dramatic sobs. Said she was sorry, that she made a mistake, that she only did it because she loved me. I scoffed. That woman wouldn't know love if it smacked her in the face. Jacob gave me a tired smile. Yeah, well, I told her it was over. That I wasn't going to be manipulated anymore. He exhaled, his fingers drumming against the counter. Then she got angry. Really angry. I frowned. Did she hurt you? No, he said quickly. Nothing like that. But she started throwing things, my things. Told me I was just like my mother, always suspicious, always looking for a reason to ruin things. I smirked. I'll take that as a compliment. Jacob actually chuckled. Yeah, me too. I tilted my head. What else did she say? He hesitated. Jacob. My voice was firm. His expression darkened. She said I'd regret this. A cold shiver ran down my spine. What the hell does that mean? He shook his head. I don't know. She was pissed. Saying crap just to get under my skin. I didn't like this. Not one bit. Elise doesn't strike me as the type to just walk away, I murmured. Jacob sighed, rubbing his temples. Yeah, well, I'm done with her. She can do whatever the hell she wants. I don't care anymore. I want to believe that. But something about the way Elise had reacted, the way she had THR-teamed him, it left a bad taste in my mouth. She wasn't done. I could feel it. And I was right. Because the next morning, Elise sent Jacob a message that changed everything. You think you won? You think this is over? You have no idea what I'm capable of. Jacob stared at his phone, his jaw tightening as he read Elise's message. He let out a bitter chuckle and shook his head. She's insane, he muttered. I grabbed the phone from his hands and read the text myself. You think you won? You think this is over? You have no idea what I'm capable of. A chill ran down my spine, but I kept my voice steady. She's desperate. Jacob scoffed. Yeah, well, desperate people do crazy things. I set his phone down on the counter and crossed my arms. She's bluffing. Jacob exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. I don't know, Mom. She's already proven she'll go to extreme lengths to get what she wants. I nodded, my mind already working. Elise wasn't going to let this go. That much was clear. And if we just ignored her, she'd keep finding ways to insert herself back into Jacob's life. We needed to put an end to it. For good. Jacob, I said slowly, do you still have anything of hers? He frowned. What do you mean? Anything. Photos, texts, emails. Anything incriminating. He hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, I have some texts where he rubbed the back of his neck. She pretty much admits to lying about the pregnancy. I felt a slow, satisfied smile spread across my face. Perfect. Jacob's eyes narrowed. Mom, what are you thinking? I tapped my fingers against the counter. It's time to turn the tables on her. He hesitated. You mean fight back? I tilted my head. Think about it, Jacob. She's trying to scare you, to make you second-guess leaving her. She wants control. The best way to deal with someone like Elise is to take that control away. Jacob sat back, considering. And how exactly do we do that? I leaned in, lowering my voice. We expose her for exactly who she is. The first step was making sure Elise couldn't twist the story in her favor. She was manipulative, cunning. If we didn't get ahead of her, she could spin this into something ugly. So we started small. Jacob called a few mutual friends, people who had met Elise, people she might try to turn against him. He casually mentioned that things hadn't worked out between them and that, unfortunately, she had lied about some pretty serious things. He didn't get into details, but he planted the seed. And then, we waited. Sure enough, Elise started reaching out. First to Jacob, then to his friends, then, finally, to his boss. That was her big mistake. One morning, Jacob got a call from his manager. Hey man, his boss said awkwardly. I don't normally get involved in personal stuff, but your ex-fiancée just sent an email to HR. Jacob stiffened. What? She's claiming you emotionally abused her, that you ruined her life and spread lies about her. Jacob's mouth went dry. She also, his boss hesitated. She said you pressured her into a paternity test because you refused to take responsibility for your child. I could see the rage building in Jacob's expression. That's bullcrap, he said through clenched teeth. His boss sighed. I figured. HR isn't taking it seriously. There's no evidence, and honestly, the whole thing sounds insane. But I want to give you a heads up. Jacob muttered a thank you and hung up. Then, he turned to me. She went after my jaw, Mom. I exhaled sharply. All right, no more playing nice. We had everything we needed to shut Elise down. Jacob had the text where she admitted to lying. I had an old friend, a lawyer, who helped us draft a cease and desist letter. It was worded carefully but firmly. If she continued to contact Jacob, his workplace, or his friends with false allegations, we would pursue legal action. If she didn't publicly retract her statements, we would release the text proving she faked her pregnancy. And if she tried to damage Jacob's reputation again, we would make sure everyone knew exactly who she was. The moment Jacob hit send, Elise called him. He let go to voicemail. Then came the texts. Elise, Jacob, please, let's talk. Elise, I didn't mean for things to go this far. Elise, I was hurt. I didn't think you'd actually go through with this. Elise, you wouldn't actually ruin my life over this, would you? Jacob looked at me. What do I say? I smiled. Nothing. Let her sweat. And sweat, she did. Over the next few days, we heard through the grapevine that Elise was panicking. People were starting to distance themselves from her. Some of Jacob's friends had blocked her. Others had confronted her directly, asking if she really faked a pregnancy. And then, finally, Elise broke. She sent Jacob a long, rambling message, begging him not to release the texts. She even offered to publicly take back everything she had said, on one condition. Jacob had to delete the evidence. He laughed when he read that. Yeah, like I'd ever trust her again. I crossed my arms. No deal. Instead, Jacob sent her a final message. Jacob, Elise, this is over. If you ever contact me again, or try to spread more lies, I won't hesitate to let the world know exactly what kind of person you are. Jacob, this is the only warning you get. Elise, Please, Jacob, I'm sorry. Can we just talk? Jacob, no. And just like that, it was done. The messages stopped. Elise disappeared from his life. She moved out of Atlanta a few months later, probably to escape the damage she had done to her own reputation. As for Jacob, he thrived. He started dating again, but this time, he was careful. He paid attention to red flags. He trusted his instincts. One night, over dinner, he looked at me and said, "Mom, you saved me." I smiled. "No, sweetheart, you saved yourself." Jacob chuckled. "Well, with a little help." We clink our glasses together, and in that moment I knew Elise was just a bad memory now, and she would regret everything for the rest of her life.